The wedding hall fell silent at the exact moment her wheelchair rolled into view. Not the respectful kind of silence. This was sharp, uncomfortable, heavy with judgment. Eyes dropped, whispers spread like fire. And then, in a single cruel sentence, the groom's family stood up and said what everyone was thinking, but no one had dared to speak out loud. "We cannot accept a paralyzed bride." The decorations were still glowing. The music hadn't even stopped, but her life as she knew it shattered right there. What no one in that hall knew was that this rejection was only the beginning, because before the night ended, a single father watching from the back would make a decision so unthinkable that it would change all their lives forever. She had been born into poverty, raised in a narrow two-room house at the edge of the city where the roof leaked during rain and dreams felt like luxuries. Yet she had always smiled easily, even after the accident, a careless driver, a loud crash, a hospital smell she never forgot. Doctors said she might never walk again. Her mother cried for days. Her father aged 10 years in a week, and she learned how to live again, inch by inch from a wheelchair. When a distant relative finally brought a marriage proposal, it felt like a miracle. The groom was from a slightly better background, educated, respected. They knew about her condition, or so they claimed. Hope returned to the house. Neighbors smiled again. Her mother stitched wedding clothes late into the night, whispering prayers with every thread. But hope can be cruel when it breaks. The rejection came publicly, brutally. The groom's mother didn't even lower her voice. She spoke of burden, a future of shame. The groom stood there silently, eyes on the floor. No one defended her, not one. Her father begged softly, dignity trembling in his hands. Her mother clutched her daughter's shoulders as if the world was trying to steal her away. And she sat there, frozen, cheeks burning, heart sinking into a place darker than any hospital room. The guests avoided eye contact. Some slipped out quietly. Others pretended to check their phones. Within minutes, the wedding hall emptied, leaving behind discarded flowers, broken promises, and a poor bride who felt smaller than ever. That should have been the end of the story. But at the very back of the hall, standing beside a cleaning cart, was a man no one noticed. He was there to mop floors after the event. A single father, widowed, tired. His hands were rough from years of work. His eyes, however, were gentle, especially when they looked at the young woman in the wheelchair. He hadn't planned to stay. He hadn't planned to get involved. But something in her silence reminded him of his own life. The day his wife died, the way people disappeared afterward. How the world looked away when pain became inconvenient. He watched as her family struggled to push the wheelchair toward the exit. He saw the way her shoulders shook, silent tears falling without sound. And in that moment, something inside him broke, and then rebuilt itself into resolve. He stepped forward. People noticed then. A janitor walking toward the center of a ruined wedding. Murmurs started again. He stopped in front of her, lowered himself so his eyes were level with hers, and spoke quietly, but clearly enough that those nearby could hear. He said he was a single father with a young daughter. He said he had nothing to offer except respect, loyalty, and a home where no one would ever call her a burden. He said he didn't know much about weddings or traditions, but if she was willing, he would marry her, right there, right now, not out of pity, out of choice. The hall froze again, but this time, it felt different. Her mother gasped. Her father stared, unsure if this was kindness or humiliation in disguise. Guests whispered louder now. Some laughed nervously, others shook their heads, and she looked at him, truly looked, for the first time. There was no arrogance in his face, no savior complex, just honesty, fear, courage. A man risking everything he had left for someone society had already thrown away. Tears streamed down her face as she asked him one question: why? He answered without hesitation. Because he had learned the hard way that life doesn't break people to punish them, it breaks them to reveal who stays, and he was someone who stayed. That night, without music, without celebration, without approval, they were married. Only a handful of people remained. No one took photos, no one applauded. But as he pushed her wheelchair out of that hall, she felt something she hadn't felt since before the accident: dignity. If you think this is where the struggle ended, you're wrong. This is where it truly began. Life after the wedding was harder than either of them imagined. He lived in a small rented place with his daughter, barely enough room for three, let alone a wheelchair. Money was tight, neighbors talked, some called him foolish. Others said he married her for sympathy. Employers looked at him differently when they found out. He worked longer hours, came home exhausted, cooked simple meals, learned how to help her without making her feel helpless. She struggled too. Guilt haunted her. She hated being dependent. She hated watching him work himself to the bone because of her. More than once she cried at night, silently, so no one would hear. But something beautiful happened in that small, struggling home. His daughter, barely 7 years old, treated her not as a burden, but as a gift. She braided her hair, sat beside her doing homework, introduced her proudly as my mama. The word felt strange at first, then healing. Slowly, the walls she had built around her heart began to crack. She started helping however she could, teaching the child, sewing clothes to sell, encouraging her husband when his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. They learned each other's rhythms. They fought sometimes. They failed often. But they never walked away. Years passed. She found strength in ways no doctor predicted, not in her legs, but in her voice. She began speaking at small gatherings, then community centers, telling her story not as a tragedy, but as survival. People listened, donations came, opportunities followed. The same society that once rejected her now invited her to speak. The man who was once just a janitor became known as the husband who chose love when no one else did. One day, they received an invitation to a wedding. It was the groom who had rejected her years ago. Life hadn't gone as planned for him. Businesses failed, relationships ended. He had heard about her work, her strength, her story. He wanted forgiveness. They attended together. As she rolled into the hall, confident, composed, radiant, the same whispers filled the room, but this time they were different. Respect replaced pity. Curiosity replaced judgment. The man beside her held her hand, not proudly, not defensively, just naturally. When the groom approached to apologize, she listened calmly, then smiled and said something that stunned everyone. She thanked him, because rejection had revealed real love, because humiliation had led her to a life she never imagined, because losing everything had shown her what truly mattered. That night, as they returned home, the single father, who once did the unthinkable, asked her softly if she ever regretted saying yes that day. She answered without pause. She said she had been rejected once by people who saw her body, but chosen forever by a man who saw her soul, and that made all the difference. Sometimes the world turns its back on you not because you are weak, but because your story is meant to rise in a way no one expects. And sometimes the greatest miracles don't come from grand gestures, but from ordinary people who choose love when it costs them everything.